a lot of people want to sell you this kind of idea. If you use my plugin, my LUT whatsoever, then you will get this A-level looks, but there are sometimes super fancy VFX work or a lot of times doing a lot of mats and stuff like that, and you can't automatically do that just because you have a plugin. The same is true if it's not shot. Well, that's another part of the equation, and I'm not even speaking about editorial or on-set work and art direction whatsoever and lens choices and so on. So I think that's also something that maybe is frustrating with all the Instagram ads and stuff like that popping up, that everybody wants to sell you a, in quotes, Hollywood look. The Hollywood look is not just a colorist.
Welcome to Color and Coffee, a podcast that's focused on the craft of color and the artist behind it. I'm your host, Jason Bodak, and each episode we'll sit down with some of the most talented artists in the industry and have a casual chat from one artist to another. We'll share their stories, their insights, their tips, and maybe even a little gear talk. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, join us for some great color discussion. Sit back, relax. You're listening to Color and Coffee. Hello and welcome to another episode of Color and Coffee. I'm your host, Jason Bodak, and today I have a really special guest for you. His name is Nico Fink, and he runs Demystify Color. It's a really great site that runs training. They do tutorials, they do DCTLs, they have resources for matching film, and most importantly, it is one of my favorite sites if you want to up your game on everything color grading. Now, they also happen to be a sponsor of the show. Thank you so much, Nico. And we are going to be talking a bunch of different subjects today, from fatherhood and post to different film emulation plugins that have been released in the last year or so. And I am so excited for this chat today. I hope you guys are too. Thank you for joining us, Nico.
Hey, Jason. Thanks so much for having me again.
It's truly a pleasure, my friend. It really has been a little while since you've been on the show, and so much has changed in our industry in such a short time.
Yeah, it's insane. I don't know when we talked last time for the podcast. I think it's 1.5 years ago or so. I think for me and also for you especially, a lot of has changed because we're both parents now too. And yeah, besides
the industry is a different place.
A child, we also got like 50 new film emulation plugins.
No joke, man. I mean, the industry is a totally different place than it was last time I had you on the show. And honestly, both of our lives are totally, totally different. So I'm not really sure if it's just the way that we're seeing the world is a different place, but also we have to admit that the entire entertainment marketplace is totally different. So before we jump into some of the film emulation stuff, I just wanted to chat with you a little bit about what life is like working in post as a father, because I don't think this is talked about enough. What is life like with you, and what are some of the things that you've been dealing with in terms of running a business, running a training site as a new father? Because honestly, for me, I can admit it is one of the hardest things I have ever done.
No, definitely. It's the same for me. And I think the funniest thing about being a parent and having a newborn is I thought like going out partying before a gig and just sleeping for 4 hours is lack of sleep. But now when you're having a newborn, you really know what lack of sleep is. And I wish I had this 4 hours after a party to sleep before the client comes in. So I think the lack of sleep and being focused and finding solutions quick, and especially when grading is definitely one of the hardest parts now. Yeah.
I so feel you on that. Honestly, I've had the similar struggle in the sense that it's been really difficult for me to figure out sort of re-triggering my brain. I too thought that I had a complete handle on it, considering that I used to stay up late and play video games and watch movies and immerse myself in the industry and look up new trends and stuff. And I figured I can just shift gears and now and just focus on my newborn. And it did not work out like that at all. My focus completely dove off a cliff, and I had to really retrain myself and start working much closer with my partner. We did end up getting some childcare a couple days a week, but obviously we don't have that at night. My kid still doesn't sleep through the night, and he's almost a year old, so we're getting through that. But it's such a new challenge, and it just reminds me that besides life, working in the film industry is constantly about learning new things. And for those of you that don't have a child out there, I think it's a lesson, and for those that can't necessarily connect with this, that's a reminder to constantly keep on your toes and be prepared to learn new things. Because I was so, honestly, I can't explain. I was so confident. I was very afraid to become a father. I was one of those guys that was very, very nervous about it. But I thought I would have a handle because everything else in life, I don't want to say came to me pretty easily, but I had a pretty good handle on being able to be tenacious and just power through things. And man, was this one of the most difficult things that I have ever done. And I'm still going through, I have to admit. And so I am honestly like still to this day looking up tips and tricks and strategies that I can, one, do things more efficiently. I certainly learned how to nap quicker. I thought I did that, but I really appreciate the time and my partner and being able to have great teamwork. And so that to me is something that I really am still getting a hand on. I don't want to sound like I have this all figured out after 11 months. I am, honestly, I feel like I'm swimming my way through it without a life jacket.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you had a couple points. I felt like the same way when I didn't have a kid and I was talking to parents and I couldn't relate at all or thought, what the fuck, what you're doing? What's so hard? I don't get it. So probably there are a lot of people out there who still don't have a child and saying, oh, Jason can't even do that or Nico can't even do that or what is going on with them. But yeah, a lot of things you just realize when you're actually a father or a mother. And I think that's one of the crazy things that you just said, learning as you go and you're figuring it out as you go. And maybe you have a plan beforehand, but it's still a human being and he or she does whatever she wants to. And if you have a plan, maybe the next day is completely different and your plan doesn't work at all. So that's definitely a good learning for me personally and also a good thing to have, but it's also very, very challenging, of course. And yeah, it's also hard or tough to manage everything, to get enough sleep, to get enough attention to the kid, get enough attention for my wife, for my job, for Demystify Color. And yeah, that time flies. It's insane because I had also like a funny thing with Demystify because I didn't respond to an email for, I think it was a bit over a day, so like 36 hours or something like that. And for me, it felt like it came in like minutes ago. But for other people, it's like I didn't respond for a week. So yeah, it's definitely shifting how you see things and what's important. Yeah, I can totally relate.
It's so funny that you mentioned the plan thing because I'm a planner. I like to plan and figure out my strategy when I'm going to deal with things. And my kid just does not care. It's so funny. And it's just like, yeah, you know what? I don't care what you planned. We're doing it this way, and I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do this. And oh, you wanted to do this at 9 o'clock. I don't care. I'm going to wake up at 6 and keep you busy. And you wanted 45 minutes before your call or before your grade. You wanted to, no, that's not happening, Dad. And it's a shock to my system, man. It is so difficult for me. So that is something I'm still getting used to, and I'm still trying to figure out strategies. And I mean, I'll put out a call out there for those fellow parents out there. I mean, if you guys have strategies, I think Nico and I are definitely open to tips and tricks for those of you that got a better handle on this, because it is very difficult. And obviously, after, I think, Nico, you're a little further on than me, but
Yeah,
I'm 11 months in.
Yeah, 14 months for me, yeah.
So yeah, I'm at 11 months, and we're, like I said, I'm swimming without a life jacket, and I'm keeping my head above water. But honestly, I've become so much more humble about it, in the sense that I don't want to say I'm willing to take advice from everybody, but I'm willing to hear it out and I welcome it. And then I sort of filter it through my thing and be like, you know what, that's a great idea. You know what, that's not for me. But I love hearing the way that other parents do it. And I've gotten some really incredible advice from people, like life-changing advice that has both led to more sleep and kept me more sane and improved my relationship with my wife. All things that honestly I thought were going to be not a big deal, but now are really huge things. And the other thing that you touched on, like you, I think, respond to all the emails for my company because we're a small business over at Pixel Tools. I was really proud of being able to respond to my emails very, very quickly. I like very detailed emails, and it has become so hard to do that. And I think I have an email that like hasn't been responded to in 48 hours, and it's difficult, man. I feel guilty about not doing that, and I am doing my best to give myself grace and set an expectation to people that I am not available 24/7 anymore.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was also my case. I constantly checked my phone and tried to respond as much as I can and as quickly as I can. And I also wrote a lot of detailed emails, and now I'm just not able to do that anymore. Of course, I will always try to provide the best support whatsoever, or also to personal questions over Instagram or stuff like that. But at some point, it's just not possible anymore that I can try to answer all and everything within minutes or hours. It just takes some time, and it's the same for me. I'm running all of this on my own, and yeah, I have to balance things out, and I can't just do one thing all the time or do another thing all the time. I just have to smash everything into my calendar and see what's more important. And that's definitely a challenge, and definitely something that has changed. But I think it's a part of life now, and maybe it will change in 1 or 2 years again, or maybe I have another kid and it's even harder then. So let's see.
It's in the plans for me too, man. And so one of the things, and then we'll move on to film emulation and the plugins that have taken over the market, is like I'm sure you have, like I've decided, me and my wife have decided to severely limit my kid's screen time until he gets screen time. And I respond on my phone a lot of the time. And so when I'm taking care of my child, it's so difficult for me to not just pull out my phone and respond to an email or respond to a chat. And it took something my wife said to me, which was, is responding to this email going to be life-changing for you or your business? And can it wait like an hour or 24 hours or a couple hours? And I have to admit, most of the time it's yes, this can wait. This is not life affecting. And so I'm trying to internalize that as much as possible, because the way that I approached it was like, this is a person that I want to provide the best customer service to, and I want to be there for them, and I want to make a good impression on them, just like I approach my color correction business. And that is just not possible right now. And the world is not going to end. It's one of the things I picked up early in my career was, this is television, not brain surgery. And so I'm trying to...
You're not saving lives.
Exactly. That is the type of approach that I'm trying to use now. Obviously, there are certain emergencies, but that is not one of them most of the time.
Yeah, no, of course, if an email comes in and there's something going wrong with the DCTL and they are on a tight schedule, of course, I get it. It's tough and it's stressful for everyone. And then I try to respond as fast as I can, even when I'm on vacation or whatsoever. But yeah, sometimes if it's in quotes like a more regular kind of question or request or whatsoever that's not super urgent, then of course it can wait for 48 hours or after my vacation or whatsoever. Yeah,
I think that's really important. And as I get older, something that I'm trying to internalize is somebody else's emergency is not my emergency. And I think that's really important.
Really good.
That I've seen a lot of people in our industry be very successful in life, yet have very little connection with their family. And that's not something that I want to have, because for me, I obviously want to be successful in my career, but it's not important enough for me to disregard my family. And it took me a number of months to obviously figure that out. And it's hard because I'll admit, addicted to my phone. And it's hard, man. It's hard. I'm actively working on it, but a lot of people
got like a little button that I block all the apps from my phone when I'm with the child. So I can try like 2 times to get on Gmail or whatsoever, and it doesn't work. And that's perfect for me, because the 3rd time I won't pick up the phone anymore, and it's better for me. It's better for the child, and we're on the same boat. I always try to limit the screen time, or don't give him any screen time at all at the moment. So Yeah, and I also try to limit my screen time because, yeah, I realize it's also better for me, not just because I'm a parent now, but for me personally, for my mental health, for everything. Yeah, it's just insane with the smartphones how you're always connected to everything, kind of. Yeah, it's crazy. And as you
Yeah.
said, you get really addicted really fast.
I mean, yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm trying. Obviously, you and I as adults have that understanding, and it's one thing for us to say, like, I am addicted to my phone. I pick it up all the time. Sometimes I just go to social media for no apparent reason, just to check
Yeah.
for it. And we can actively say, like, oh, look, I'm addicted to it. Ha. But a child doesn't have that understanding. And so that's something that I really am trying to prevent as I work on my own bad habits. So moving on a little bit, because I'm sure a lot of people don't want this to be a podcast about our own addictions and our journey through fatherhood.
Yeah,
Let's talk
maybe
about
we can do a Discord group for everyone who's on the same boat.
recovering phone addicts and new fathers.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea, actually. The industry, both you and I have a pretty big interest in film emulation. Your site has a significant resources for tutorials, DCTLs, and products on film emulation. I have a product called Film Emulsion on Pixel Tools for film emulation that we actually use a bunch of resources from your website. And besides that, there's a bunch of different plugins from Filmbox to ARRI's new plugin to Film Convert, Dehancer. I could go on and on. And you reached out to me because you wanted to talk about how this market was getting crowded and some of your thoughts on that. And I thought that was really a great conversation. So I wanted to dive into that a little deeper. So let's talk about that, about how the film emulation market has gotten not only crowded, but it's now difficult to differentiate between some of these plugins.
In 2025, it was insane. I think we had an explosion of plugins, like OFX and DCTLs, and I kind of feel it's getting a bit frustrated, so to say, because they're all kind of in quotes trying to do the same thing. Of course, we all know that they perform differently, and everybody has their own style and they look a bit different and so on. But I think the kind of idea is the same, that everybody sells it like, with mine you can achieve this Hollywood film looks in quotes, or the secret sauce or whatsoever. That's one thing. And also the other thing is what I find even more frustrating is that a lot of open source stuff or even not open source stuff with DCTLs get repackaged and sold by a bunch of different people. And it's crazy when you see some DCTLs popping up for $100 or $200 and you know it's just open source stuff repackaged. Or even, I think it was even from your side, you had a power grade up and they just repackaged it and sold it. And I don't really get it why our kind of niche profession, of course I know color grading is getting bigger every year and more accessible and so, but I think we're still niche. But anyhow, it turned into a kind of $1 million business selling DCTLs and plugins, and I think it's a bit of a weird thing that's happening at the moment, and I think nobody really talked about it yet publicly. And
Yeah.
I thought it's a great topic to pick up and maybe have a conversation about it. Even maybe I'm not making a lot of friends with some of my opinions, but yeah.
Well, I thought it was really interesting, and that's why I wanted to invite you back on the show, because I have been sitting here very intrigued by it. And obviously, you and I both have products in this market. So it's sort of funny. Somebody might be sitting there saying it's pretty funny with these two guys that make their own film emulation products complaining about the market. But it's interesting in the fact that there is both low-hanging and high-hanging fruit. And so I think it's worth differentiating, I think, what we're talking about specifically. So I'll mention the different levels of it. So I think on one level, you have products like Filmbox and Genesis that are on a very, very high level, analyzing what is it like from the light level going all the way to the digital sensor, essentially. And what is going on between if you just captured it from digital to if you shot it on film. And obviously Genesis and Filmbox do this a little bit differently. And so, but it's a very high level approach to give you that film look. And I use that in like quotations, and they provide a very easy, intuitive setup. Essentially, you can get your halation, you can get your grain, and you get a significant number of stocks. And again, both Genesis and Filmbox approach this differently in how they go about that. And because of the amount of resource and research and dedication it took to both profile all these different stocks, they're very expensive. And so those products, I don't have any problem with. I think they're very, very useful. They're used on a lot of Hollywood productions. I think they're both very great products. Oh, it's also worth saying that like those products, because of the high cost of them, they're not as accessible to everybody. And that's, I guess, to be accepted. If you were to bring these products down to a certain cost, you wouldn't be able to continue development on them because they're both made by small teams. Colin and his team are pretty small. And also the Filmbox team, who I had on the podcast earlier, is just 3 guys. So the requirements to develop these products are pretty high. And the teams, because it's not a huge facility, they need to price these appropriately. And so those products, I think, are very, very useful. They allow you to do something like, instead of shooting on film, you can actually mix and match film and digital very, very accurately. Those are very useful. On the middle level, you have something like your and my products, where I'm profiling film, you're going out and shooting film, you're essentially profiling them as am I. It's not to what I'll call the same level in accuracy that we're getting with Filmbox and Genesis. We're taking slightly different approaches. You and I are researching our own methods, but you are getting a pretty good result. We may not have as many options as we have with Filmbox and Genesis, but what we're able to do because of that, and because of the less resources that we have to put into that, we're able to offer it at a much lower price point.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think, and that's, a lot of people are comparing our products to Filmbox and Genesis. I don't think that's actually what we're trying to do. At least that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to offer something that's more affordable with less options than some of the higher end products, while giving you access to real stocks, real halation, real grain, stuff like that, and continued support that allows us to continue to develop those products, because I'm continuing to profile film, you're shooting more film. And for those of you that don't know, buying film and developing film is very expensive, especially today.
Yeah, and it's getting even more expensive, like as we speak, kind of. It's crazy. I think it's a bit better, the situation in the US, but here in Europe, it's really expensive. And we also don't have like such high-end labs like photochem over in US or in LA, or I think you also have some other really good labs. We just have, I think the best one that I worked with a lot of times is CineLab in UK. Mm-hmm. I think it kind of matches, in quotes, what photochem does. But yeah, with the Brexit, it's also kind of tough to ship stuff out there from Austria and stuff like that, and it's also not as straightforward. I think you summed it up well, and I think we have like three, 4 really big plugins that came out, at least that I'm aware of, like as an OFX plugin, and I think that's also worth pointing out that we are just doing DCTLs, and all the bigger ones are OFX, because OFX has less limitations than DCTLs. Yeah. As you said, like the Filmbox upgrade, it's insane, and I really love what they did, because you see that they really care about the community, because they released it for free if you had the perpetual license. And it's crazy, because I bought it, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I can't really remember exactly, and then I just get a huge amount of new stocks and grain profiles and whatsoever for free. So you can really see that they care about like the community, and don't necessarily only want to make money, you know. Of course, we all have to make money, me too, but yeah, it's not like the number one goal with them, and that's really nice to see. And that's also like a tough position now with ARRI, because we all know the struggle. And I was also thinking, should I just buy the plugin even I may never use it, or may have like similar profiles on my own, because I profiled my own film and stuff like that, just to support ARRI, because they're struggling. And we are all here just because of ARRI, more or less, because it's insane what they innovated and what they did, because we all know their products, like the cameras, but yeah, also with the film recorder, with the film scanner. It's insane what they innovated, and it's yeah, really sad to see that they are struggling now.
So ARRI
Yeah.
also released, they call it ARRI Film Lab, and it's a
Yeah.
license-based OFX plugin that, similar to what we were discussing, is a film emulation product. I just pulled it up right here. And it emulates film grain, color, halation, gate weave. It doesn't have as many stocks as some of the other ones, so I think I'm going to say that it fits somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't
Mhm.
rate it as highly as say Genesis and Film Lab. So I'd say it's somewhere closer to what you and I have, but I still think it's an excellent product. And like you, I also had the same thought, like should I buy it just to support ARRI, because obviously ARRI is struggling a little bit. The different parts of the company have closed down.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I want to make sure we jump into is on the low level, we have film
Yeah.
emulation power grades.
Yeah.
And I think film emulation power grades are, while still useful, I think Juan Millar's power grades are absolutely incredible. He has done some incredible work, but there's no way to protect them. And so because of that, we've seen this big wave of people essentially copying them and reselling them on Etsy and launching an Instagram ad and reselling them. And I mean, just like you, I've seen either open source DCTLs, my own DCTLs, your DCTLs being resold because there's very little way for us to protect them. And it's difficult. There's no other way to say it. It's difficult to see that happening when the goal, for me at least, was to increase and provide a way for people to emulate real film in a way that I think is affordable and approachable. And it's clear that a lot of people are trying to essentially just make a little money off something without the work that goes in there. The way that I work at Pixel Tools, we approach something very specifically in the sense that, like, I like things to be like Legos. I want it to be compatible with everything. And something that you make or a DCTL or a power grid that somebody else make doesn't always fit within that. And so the things that I make are very specific. And obviously other people aren't going to have that care. It's just usually I just want it to look good. And as long as somebody else wants it also to look good, I'm going to sell it like that. And for me, that's a little bit disingenuous because, as I'm sure you know, when you're trying to create a power grade for yourself, it's one thing. But when you're trying to create a power grade that works for the wide audience, it's a totally different ballgame. You have to try and predict how they're going to use it, how they're going to misuse it, what faults they're going to do, how to direct them inside the power grade. Where do you use things first? How do you label it? How do you lay the power grade out? And so for me, it's really a different ballgame. And so I don't have an answer for this, but I do find myself being disappointed, I think is the best word, that I see some of the low-hanging fruit, as I'll call it, of people using cheap Instagram or Facebook ads to try and resell products that are either open source or from another creator like yourself and mine. And so I think the biggest thing that I'm walking away with is that is not entirely, like, we could have predicted this in the fact that film emulation is one, it's a highly sought after look. It's highly sought after in that Kodak and Fuji spent decades of time making film look and feel good. It doesn't look like the way we see in our eye. It looks preferable. So when digital sensors came along and didn't essentially try to match the way that our eye sees, that wasn't going to be what people wanted. And so now that people want to make things look filmic and cinematic, it's really not that surprising that people are reaching for film emulation. And now that there are so many tools out there, it's not that surprising that everybody is trying to get a little piece of that pie.
Yeah, no, and that's maybe also something that I need to add, that especially like the first two levels, if we focus on that, like the OFX and most of the DCTLs, and I don't want you to complain that there are that many out there, because yeah, most of them are very well made and are really good. So I'm not complaining that it's bad and nobody should do it. And as you said, I also get it why people want that their footage look this way or this kind of way, because I'm in the same boat. I started like, I don't know, 2020 when I had more free time to dive into figuring out what Steve Yedlin is doing with his display prep demo. And it all started that way. So it was the same for me. And so I can't complain or can't judge anyone doing this or want to buy these plugins. That's totally relatable and totally understandable. For me, I think what really stands out this year maybe to add this, because I talked with the people and they're really lovely people over at Hell Pictures. I hope I pronounced it correctly, the French company.
Yeah, I saw them
They also
recently. So
released,
another useful tool.
yeah, they also released like 2 plugins, one for like the color and contrast part and one for the texture part. And I had a talk with them like just a week ago or so, and they're really, really great people. And I also love their plugin. And what I love even more is kind of relatable to how Filmbox is doing stuff. They really care about the community. They're very transparent and open what they did, how they built it under the hood, how they came up with it. And I think what's really nice is what they said. It's not quote unquote. So I I hope I'm not saying something wrong here, but kind of how I interpreted it is they didn't want to release another film emulation plugin because we have so many out there, and it's hard to add something, that's not
Yeah.
out there. So they took this approach and made everything with, it's hard for me to say in English, parameterized.
Yeah, parameterized.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pronounce. You can get like a film emulation with their plugin, of course, because you can dial in the contrast curve that it looks like a Fuji or a Kodak film print emulation. You can tweak red, green, blues, whatever to feel that way, so you can get there. But the great thing is, what I wanted to say is that they say we have the tools, or they provided tools to move even further, because now digital cameras are probably, don't start that discussion, but maybe are better for some jobs, or they have the dynamic range. They don't have like 8 stops dynamic range when they came out anymore, So maybe we have to think how we should move further.
Yeah.
Or maybe just take parts of film emulation, maybe I want the contrast curve, but maybe I want my reds look different or whatsoever. And I think that's a really great point, what they said and what they provided and how they approached their plugin and coded it up and stuff like that. I really liked this and thought, yeah, that's a great thing to keep in mind, because I can like do a preset that looks kind of similar to a 2383, but then tweak the hell out of it, changing the contrast curve, changing how reds behave, for example, and so on. And I think that's a really good point, what they said and what they added with their approach to the market.
I think that's really interesting. And I do want to just clear one thing up. It may sound potentially negative that Nico and I are bagging on people making their own approach to film emulation. And that's absolutely not what we're trying to do. If you have your own approach and you think you can add something to any type of film emulation, whether it be color, whether it be texture, whether it be the grain or the halation, by all means, please continue to make your way of going about this. That's how the plugin that Nico just described was created. I think what we're more talking about is taking somebody else's previously approach, tweaking it 1 or 2%, and then calling it your own, because that's really not your own. But the way that we are able to move the industry and film emulation forward and beyond is by people having new ideas and moving it forward. We all started from somewhere. I also learned a ton from Steve Yedlin and had some different ideas. I'm a huge halation nerd, and it all starts from somewhere. So if you are sitting here listening to this podcast saying, I had this really cool idea for a texture plugin, or I wanted to approach film emulation slightly differently, please continue to do your work on it. This is not to bag on you creating your new tools. And I highly encourage you to continue your work. I've had a couple filmmakers reach out to me with different texture, with different grain plugins, and there is always room for new approaches. But if you're going to take somebody's previous work, whether it be open source, whether it be not open source, and barely tweak it and then try and call it your own, that's not necessarily going to be helpful to the industry, to anything else besides to make a little bit of money. And I think that's what I think a lot of people are getting a little bit tired of. But
yeah, no, definitely.
We are able to move things forward by new ideas, new approaches, new concepts. And what I think you're describing is the way that this company is approaching it is what I like to call modern film emulation. We are able to take the concepts, the ideas, the philosophies that are from film emulation and move it forward and beyond the limitations of actual celluloid, which I truly love, because we aren't as limited as we were with celluloid stock, and we don't have to stick with those. Obviously, there is some beauty to fully emulating the photochemical process, and I love projects that we can do that. I love working on projects that are shot on photochemical film, but I also love being able to go beyond that, like you said, especially with technologies like HDR, and saying, okay, we are going to emulate a negative, but we're not going to do it through a print, or we're going to do the negative and the print, but we're not going to limit the dynamic range, or we're going to use a totally different contrast curve, or we're going to really extend the saturation beyond what it would go on film. These are really cool ideas that we can do now, and it's worth experimenting with. And I love that this company is thinking outside the box in that way to allow people that may not be as technical to be creative. And that's what I love. I also love that they have two different tools, one for texture and one for color, because I don't think enough people are messing around with texture. And I think texture is one of the most creative areas that you can get things to look and feel differently. So I'm really excited to play around with that tool. And I saw it, but I haven't played around with it yet. So I'm excited to reach out to them and say, hey, and see if I can get my hands on it.
I can also connect you guys if you want to.
Definitely.
You had another great point here, and I think maybe that's what's now, when I heard it, maybe that's the thing that's even frustrating for me, because of course I want that people explore this stuff, because that's maybe I'm also part because of it, that there are, or guilty that there are so many plugins out there, or DCTLs or whatsoever, because I just throw out my charts, and that's also the beauty of it, that everybody can buy them and everybody ends up with different profiles, even though they're even based on the same charts, your product is looking different than my own profiles or from someone else, because they are sending me over sometimes their stuff and say, hey, how do you like it? I made it because of your charts. And so that's really beautiful to see, and that's great, and that should definitely continue. But what you said, like the creative side of things, and maybe that's the frustrating part for me, that I feel like some people may jump into DCTLs or OFX plugins or whatsoever too quickly, because they're maybe just starting out with color grading, or just are beginner or intermediate colorists, and maybe they're not as creative anymore because they're looking for this kind of one-click solution, that this plugin costs, I don't know, a lot of money, and it should look beautiful right out of the box, and I shouldn't do anything anymore. And I also heard someone else saying you shouldn't do much in the grading stuff. Yeah, that's probably true when you're working with A-level DPs on super big budget Hollywood blockbusters, when they're making show lots and they're having a lot of time and money for shooting. Of course, then everything will look perfect when it comes to you, and it's hard to not mess it up. And maybe some of these super high-level colorists are doing sometimes not much to the image because it's perfect out of the box. But I think it's not true for independent colorists working on, I don't know, maybe super small commercials or stuff like that. And maybe that's the frustrating thing for me, that I feel that a lot of people are looking for these one-click solutions, and they're not, like, sounds a bit harsh, honoring the craft anymore, to try stuff out, to push, lift, gamma, gain around, and figuring stuff out. And some of my best grades back in the days were because I didn't know all the technical stuff, and I had like happy accidents or stuff like that. That's some of my most beautiful grades came out of. And maybe that's the thing that I feel is a bit frustrating with all these plugins coming up, that gets lost, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm completely wrong with this assumption. I don't know.
I certainly don't think you're wrong. But one of the things that gets frustrating for me is that it feels, and I think this is probably pretty common, is people think that higher end productions, they shoot things perfect, and so they don't really have to grade. And so I've talked to a lot of high end DPs DPs and colorists that I try and get on the show. And they're very busy, so a lot of the times I don't come on the show, but I continue to talk to them, whether it's casually over Instagram or over Zoom and other stuff. And so I've been chatting with the colorist for Pluribus and Welcome to Derry, which is one of my favorite shows right now. And two of the greatest looking shows on television right now. I just watched the latest episode of Welcome to Derry last night. And so you think it might look perfect out of the can, and it's just a gorgeous looking show, especially Welcome to Derry. Pluribus looks pretty like normal, but there's so much work that goes into that, and especially Welcome to Derry. I was speaking to the secondary colorist Jesus Borrego, and he was telling me just there are mats and mats and mats. He's like, there's like 20 or 30 mats on one of these shots. And so because it's shot so well, they're able to spend so much time doing the secondary work on the show to make it really feel the way that they want it to feel. So yeah, maybe the balance doesn't need as much work as you and I put into it, but because they have this extra time, they can really finesse the image the way that they want to. And it really goes into making the image pop in the way that they want to. So it's not like they're not spending the time on this image, but just because it's shot so professionally, they're able to put the time where it really matters. Obviously, there's VFX, and that's what some of the mats are for. But this other stuff allows them to do things like Welcome to Derry goes into a bunch of different times, and each of these times has different looks for it. They go into black and white. There is just some absolutely incredible looks. And I'm positive that they would have not been able to get the finesse, especially for a television show, that they were able to do if it was not shot well. So it's not like they're not able and it just pops out of the can looking like that. But because it's shot professionally, they're able to finesse in a way that you and I just don't have the time to do because you and I are working on the main balance. And I think a lot of people forget that, where the time on these professional productions is still put in there, but because they don't have to focus on the basic part, they can go put it elsewhere.
Yeah, no, definitely. Sorry if it came out wrong. I just remembered on top of my head. I think it's from Walter Volpato, where he said kinda not really one-to-one, but kinda that he went too far with the grade, and the DPs or the director said, "Hey, thanks for reshooting my movie."
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
Walter's a mentor of mine, and
really
sometimes that is fun.
Thing that I heard from. So yeah, I'm totally with you. Also, just lately because I watched Stranger Things, and that's also I can't even imagine how to work on such a show. It must be so hard with, I can't even imagine how many layers of VFX and mats and whatsoever they have in there. I think it must be insane. And it's so well made, and also to keep all of this in flow and continuous, I think it must be crazy hard to pull off. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's easier when you're A-level colorist. I think the work is just
depends on the job.
It's different.
Exactly.
You have different problems, you have different challenges, and maybe the shooting part isn't one, but maybe all the studios and the executives and everybody has an opinion or kind of that way. Maybe that's a big challenge for them then, or stuff like
Your
that.
focus shifts. Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't have less.
To make it full circle.
Yeah, you're right. Oh my God, exactly. So I agree with you totally. And not every project is going to require the mats and VFX style that Stranger Things and Welcome to Derry is going to require. Some may require, like Walter said, you just need to balance and then it's done. There's certainly projects that are just going to go out like that. But I do feel that because people have watched, whether it's interviews or behind the scenes, that have misrepresented color grading in a way that, it's just easier up at the top. And I don't really think that's necessarily true. I think the problems are different. And I think you put it correctly.
Yeah, no, definitely. And hopefully also your work with the CSI helps to get more focus, because I think it's just like a few months back that we actually got the IMDb credit for digital intermediate colorists, or I think it's called that way, right? Yeah. So
yeah, we shifted
for putting in all the work.
I was just a small part of a large team, but yeah, for those of you that are unaware, on IMDb, a large team in collaboration with the CSI and IMDb, we have successfully moved all colorist credits out of editorial and into the color department, and that is a huge, huge step forward for Colorist, whether you're part of the CSI or not. So that is really a huge step forward in getting Colorist recognized correctly.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's amazing. And yeah, I think that's maybe also the thing where you have to kind of differentiate to go a bit back to the plugins, because maybe that's also a thing that everybody wants to sell. A lot of people want to sell you this kind of idea. If you use my plugin, my LUT whatsoever, then you will get this A-level looks, but you're not there because of a plugin, because as you just mentioned, there are sometimes super fancy VFX work and or a lot of times doing a lot of mats and stuff like that, and you can't automatically do that just because you have a plugin for your ODT or whatsoever. And the same is true if it's not shot well or as intended for the look, or maybe you didn't have a show LUT for shooting or stuff like that, then that's another part of the equation. And I'm not even speaking about editorial or on-set work and art direction whatsoever and lens choices and so on. So I think that's also something that maybe is frustrating with all the Instagram ads and stuff like that popping up, that everybody wants to sell you a, in quotes, Hollywood look. Yeah, the Hollywood look is not just a colorist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a good way to sort of sum up this conversation as a whole is that the Hollywood look is a combination of an amalgam of many different things.
Yeah.
It starts on set with wardrobe. It's then captured by a great DP who chooses his lenses and his cameras precisely. It is lit by a great gaffer. It is acted well. It is then massaged by a great colorist who chooses his tools correctly. And a film emulation plugin may be part of those tools, just like a pen, just like a mouse and a control panel and a stream deck and a great reference monitor. But it is simply one of those many tools. It is not the one button tool of that Hollywood look. And so it's disingenuous to say that Filmbox is the Hollywood look, or ARRI, or my product, or your product is the Hollywood look. It is one tiny piece. And so obviously it may look nice on an ad for it to say, this product helped create the Hollywood look. But I think the key part is helped. And it is a very small part of that. Without the rest of that sandwich, it's just the lettuce on the bread, man. If you don't have the turkey and the bread and the sauce and it's all grilled correctly, it's just soggy.
Yeah, no, I think that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, you have summed it up very well. Definitely. Maybe let's see how the journey goes, if we see even more plugins popping up in 2026, or maybe we shift gears and maybe everybody wants to have a different look. Let's see.
Yeah, I would love, I'll ask you an interesting question. I would love to see more shows embracing a digital style look. I think digital style looks are bold and different, and also beautiful. I think Michael Mann was one of the first to really embrace digital style looks. I think David Fincher is really good at embracing non-filmic digital style looks. Michael Mann did it in his film with Tom Cruise as a taxi driver. I'm blanking on it right now. Collateral, where they shot really all at night and they didn't try and embrace film at all. They really leaned into the way that the camera, blanking on the camera type. But I would love to see the way that people leaning into some of the digital style looks and create some really interesting looking film. I'm curious what you might be interested in seeing in the coming years with look design.
The funny thing is, because I just looked up a film reference some days ago and I totally fell down a rabbit hole, because I think we're kind of maybe even there already a bit, because we're not emulating everything. And if you see those series or films from the 90s, I thought in my memory they look way better than they actually look when I'm looking up stills. So yeah, I think we are already kind of there a tiny bit, because we have this memory of how film looks, but we make it look different already, I think. And so that's definitely a good thing, don't get me wrong. And I think also if you capture something on film, it also looks totally different now, because we're not going through telecine anymore, or just doing contact prints right out of the neck or stuff like that. So that's a whole topic for another day. But I think we're already there. Also, as you said, that you don't have to finish with the film print emulation or with the film print if you don't want to. You can have a scanned neg and do whatever you want with it. And that's really amazing. And yeah, as you said, with the digital looks, maybe that's also a thing. What I try to do at the moment myself, and what would be really great to see if, in quotes, kind of think outside of the box. I think a really funny thing is with, or let's put it different. I think to make looks that are not kind of look the same because they're based on some sort of 2383 emulation. I've been there myself. I used it a lot and I did a lot of looks that look the same way, and it's still hard for me to not do it because I like how it looks, but the funny thing is with Wes Anderson movie that came out, there was a really funny comment on Facebook on one of the
Asteroid City.
yeah, where I won't name names, but a really big colorist here in Europe commented that said, if a random guy with no name would post such a still in the group, everybody would say, yeah, I don't even saying what they would say, and that it looks totally garbage and shit, and he uses some cheap ass LUT and whatsoever. So he would get totally destroyed. But if Wes Anderson is doing it, then it looks nice and artistic. But I don't, and I thought about this, and I would agree actually to him. But at the same way, I kept looking at the images and pulled some more stills from film grab from the film. Then I was like, yeah, but it kind of is refreshing to see a totally different approach. And if you analyze it, you see that it's kind of hard to even get to that look, because I tried it myself to some footage. Of course, now we're there again with art direction, all this stuff. Of course, it wasn't the same way and stuff like that. But where I knew it's looking kind of similar, and it's actually hard to get this look. And I think it's actually refreshing to see something completely different that maybe even challenges you. At first sight, you say, what the fuck is this? And then it's like, oh, yeah, but it's nice that we're actually doing art here. And it's great that people are creative and thinking outside of the box and doing something completely different. And I think that's super nice. And I would love to see more of that, that not kind of everybody, in quotes, doing the same thing and just applying one of the 100 different versions of 2383 emulation out there and grading underneath it. So that's definitely nice. And
it was challenging. It's nice to see people have an opinion, whether you like it or you hate it. It's nice to see that there's a difference of opinion. One of the things that you gave me an idea, and it's like, it's already been a couple years since this film came out, but Yvonne Lucas graded Barbie. And I know this is a fun movie to bring up, but I loved the look of Barbie. And more than the look of Barbie, I loved the mechanics behind it. And for those of you that are not aware, the mechanics behind it is they used a Technicolor style emulation, but they biased it towards pink as opposed. And that to me is just such a smart and cool way of doing it, so that the pink would be basically the stronger color. And I just love that. Essentially, they used a film style emulation, but they tweaked it specifically for the show. And it doesn't look like it's pasted on top. It really comes out well, while still looking normal-ish. And that to me is the exact type of film emulation that I would like more people to embrace, is one that really takes the film, its narrative, its visual appeal into in mind. Essentially, is they really clearly took what they want this film to look like. They decided to embrace, how are we going to do exactly what we want this film to feel and look like. And then they went through and said, okay, what in the history of film can we do to make this look as best as possible? And they landed on a modified Technicolor. And that was just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, that's totally amazing. There's also a really article from Rodrigo Preto, I hope I pronounce it correctly, the DP of the show, where he talked about the challenges with dialing in the different colors and stuff like that. So it's really insane if you read this and then know how hard it was to get all the colors right, shoot this kind of movie. And what's even more impressive for me is that I think it was the same year or kind of close together, he shot the Flowers of the Killer Moon. I think I hope the name is correct, from the Scorsese movie. And this again looks totally different, and it's the same DP, and I think also the same colorist. And that's also really impressive to see how they did two movies that look completely different. And they had on both movies some crafted look that's insanely well made. Yeah. So that's also a really great thing that you just said and come up with. Yeah, totally with you.
So that was a really fun discussion on film emulation, on fatherhood in film, and just really catching up with you, Nico. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And honestly, thank you so much for sponsoring the show. It really is great to have you as a sponsor for the show, and we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's such a great resource for everyone, and I try to help as good as I can. And thanks for having me again. I hope people are interested in our thoughts and what we have to say about this situation with all the plugins. And yeah, thanks to you too for having a great conversation and catching up again. It was really amazing.
It's truly my pleasure. And for this episode of Color and Coffee, I'm Jason Bodak, and thank you guys for joining us. Happy grading. And that's a wrap. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and your podcast app of choice. Search for @Color&Coffee or @Color&Coffee Podcast and join the conversation. If you're using Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. Huge thanks to FSI, Demystify Color, and Pixel Tools for sponsoring the show. Until the next episode,